In this video, I'm going to give my top 15 UFC fighters of all time, so let's get right into it. At number 15, I have Conor McGregor. I know some people don't put him in their top 15 because he lost his last few fights, but they forgot how good he used to be in his prime. When he knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, or when he dominated Eddie Alvarez to become the first double champ in the UFC. And people forgot that he knocked out Dustin Poirier a while ago and he beat Max Holloway too. He didn't have any title defenses, but he was the first double champ in the UFC. And in my opinion, he's the best striker of all time. Some of the knockouts he had were insane. He was finishing guys in just minutes. And he's definitely, in my opinion, he's the most exciting fighter in the UFC. The fights he had with Nate Diaz, Dustin Poirier, Eddie Alvarez, those were all super exciting fights. So let's go on to number 14. I have Tyron Woodley. I think he's a top 3 welterweight of all time. His record was 19-7. So he did go on a bit of a losing streak towards the end of his career, but he still had a good title run. His best friends are Robbie Lawler, Darren Till, Stephen Thompson. And he did have a sad downfall. He got knocked out by Jake Paul after the UFC. But I think he had 5 title wins, which is really good, especially in the welterweight division. At number 13, I have Max Holloway. Max Holloway would probably be the best featherweight of all time if it wasn't for Volkanovski. If it wasn't for Volkanovski, Max Holloway would probably have like 5 or 6 defenses. His best friends are Jose Aldo. He beat him twice. He beat Charles Oliveira a while ago. The Korean Zombie. Brian Ortega. He just completely wiped the entire featherweight division other than Volkanovski. And you could argue some of his Volkanovski fights were robberies. He's probably the best boxer in the UFC. And it's crazy. I don't think he's lost to anybody at featherweight other than Volk. And he had 3 title defenses before that loss too. And if he could beat Justin Gaethje at UFC 300, he'd definitely be higher on the list. He could maybe even be at number 12 or 11. At 12, I have Charles Oliveira. His record is 34 wins and 9 losses. At the beginning of his career, he did have a bad start. He was getting knocked out. He was getting finished. But lately, he's had a 12 fight win streak. He's the best finisher in UFC history. He's the most exciting fighter there is. He has finishes over Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Beneil Dariush, Tony Ferguson. He probably has one of the most stacked resumes of all time. I don't think he's better than Khabib as a lightweight GOAT or Islam yet. But right now, I think he could be every single Islam or every single fighter other than Islam. The only thing stopping him really is his glass jaw. Every single fight he gets rocked really badly, but then he comes back. So I don't think it plays too much of a factor. I just don't think his jaw is that good. But I really, really want to see a rematch with him and Islam. I don't think he would beat Islam, but I really want to see that fight. Which, speaking of Islam, I have him at number 11. His record is 25-1. I know some people think it's too early to put him this high, but his career is really good right now. He dominated Charles Oliveira. He knocked out Volkanovski once and then had the fight of the year with Volkanovski too. He has finishes over Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, which I forgot to add in the list, but Dan Hooker, Drew Dober, Arman Tsarukyan. I really want to see the Arman Tsarukyan rematch if he could beat Charles Oliveira at UFC 300. I think in terms of pure skill, he's probably top 3 fighters of all time. He's one of the most well-rounded fighters there is. His striking's really good. His wrestling's really good. And I think he's the second best lightweight right now other than Khabib. Or not right now, but of all time. At number 10, I have Kamaru Usman. He was so good before he got knocked out by Leon in the last minute. His record's 20-4. but he is on a 3-fight losing streak. 2 of those fights were a really, really close decision. The other fight, he was dominating and then got knocked out in the last minute. But he has wins over Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington, Gilbert Burns, Leon Edwards, Tyron Woodley. I mean, he wiped out the entire welterweight division. If he beat Leon again, there'd probably be no one else for him to fight, and he'd probably just have to move up to middleweight. I think in his prime, he could beat every single welterweight, including GSP. At 9, I have Israel Adesanya. People forget how good he is. His record is 26-3, and he does have 8 title wins, which is insane. His best wins are over. I think his best win of all time is when he knocked out Alex Pereira. He knocked out Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, and he did not knock out Anderson Silva, but he does have a win over him. I think he's top 3 strikers of all time in the UFC. And people forget how good he was just because he lost to Sean Strickland. And he did lose to Alex Pereira, but when he lost to Alex Pereira, he was dominating that entire fight and then loses in the last minute or last few minutes. So I think he could definitely come back, knock out Sean Strickland or DDP or whoever's champ. But yeah. At number 8, I have Jose Aldo. I really don't have much to say about it, to be honest. His record was 31-8. His best wins were Korean Zombie, Chad Mendes, and Frankie Edgar. But he was like, people forget how good he was just because he got knocked out by Conor McGregor in 13 seconds. Other than that, he was on like a 10-year undefeated streak. He had I think 9 title wins, which is insane. So that's why I have him at number 8. At number 7, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me here. I have Demetrius Johnson. His record was 25-4. And this is the reason I don't have him in the top 5 or top 3. Or most people think he's the greatest fighter of all time. I completely disagree. It's because he was fighting the worst division in the entire UFC. He did have 10 defenses, but most of them were against fighters who weren't even that good. I mean, I know he beat Henry Cejudo, and he had but most of his other finishes were most of his other wins were just kind of boring. He was defending his title against people coming off 2 losses, which if you have 2 losses, how do you get a title shot? So that's why I have him at number 7. I think he would not have done. Even if he was bigger, he would not have done as well at bantamweight or any other division. He just kind of got lucky because flyweight is the worst division in the entire UFC. It's probably the most boring division there is. 6, I have Volkanovski. I know he did just get knocked out in both of his last 2 fights, but I still think he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. Easily one of the most skilled fighters there was. He beat Max Holloway 3 times, Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez, Jose Aldo. He just has a super stacked resume. He wiped the entire featherweight division, and he almost beat Islam, almost became double champ. So I think he's top 5 or top 3 most skilled and well-rounded fighters there is. He really proved how good his wrestling was when he fought Islam and didn't get submitted even when he had his back. At number 5, I have Daniel Cormier. Most people would disagree, but Daniel Cormier, in my opinion, is one of the greatest fighters of all time. His record was 22-3. His best wins were Stipe, Anthony Johnson, Anderson Silva. The reason I have him this high is because he became double champ and defended both belts. Most people become double champ and then vacate the belts. But he was fighting in a Division 2 where he was smaller than everyone else. Usually most heavyweights are 6'3" or 6'4" or 6'5". He was 5'9". So he was really small for the division, but he was still beating everyone else up, which is why I'm at number 5. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me here, but at number 4, I have Khabib. His record was 29-0, never lost a fight, barely lost a round to Conor. His best wins were Conor, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, RDA, and Edson Barboza. The main reason I have him this high up is because of how dominant he was. He beat up all of his opponents. If he didn't finish them, then he would have super dominant decisions. It'd be like 30-26, 30-25. He has the most 10-8s in UFC history. Again, never lost a round other than to Conor. So that's why I have him this high up. 3, I have Anderson Silva. Now, he doesn't really have that many good wins, but he did have a bunch of title defenses. And his wins were decent. He beat up Chael Sonnen, Forrest Griffin. Or he didn't beat up Chael Sonnen, but still. He had the longest win streak in UFC history. Now, I know he went on a really long losing streak towards the end of his career, but he was super old at that time. I think he is one of the best strikers in UFC history too, which is why I have him at number 3. At number 2, no brainer, I have George St. Pierre. His record was 26-2, and his best wins were Matt Hughes, BJ Penn, Michael Bisping. I put him this high up because he had, I think, 11 title defenses. I think he had the most title defenses out of anyone. It's either him or Anderson Silva. And not only that, he became a double champ. Towards the end of his career, he went and moved to middleweight and won a belt there. He avenged both the losses he had too, so yeah. And of course, number 1, I have John Jones, 28-0. I mean, he did lose a fight, but it was a disqualification. He has the most stacked resume. He beat Daniel Cormier twice, Suragan, all these fighters. He has a super, super stacked resume. Youngest champion in UFC history. He's been champ for so many years now. I mean, I know he vacated it sometimes and then came back, but he's never lost a fight. He was a champion in 2 different weight classes.